Nada Tanumanisam Shankaram Nada Tanumanisam Shankaram Nada Tanumanisam Shankaram Nada Tanumanisam Shankaram Nada Tanumanisam Namami me manasa shirasa nadanu manisha shankaram Namami me manasa shirasa nadanu manisha modakara Nigamo Tamasama Modakara Nigamo Tamasama Modakara Nigamo Tamasama Veda Saru Varam Varam Veda Saru Varam Varam Nada Tanumanisam Shankaram Yamanile Manasa Shirasa Nada Tanumanisam Today the topic is history of Indian music, more specifically South Indian or what we call today as Carnatic music. A lot of it is not documented, and I am here to share with you what I learned from my guru Painganadu K. Rajagopal, who gave me an insight into a lot of things which we pieced together to say this probably was how music must have evolved. The song that I just sang gives a reference. It's a Kriti by Saint Tyagaraja, which says that it's a reference to our music in which it has been said to evolve from the Samaveda. One thing is very certain is that it's the oldest surviving system of classical music today that is existent as a continuum of musical expression handed down from Vedas. And how long are the Vedas? They are said to be timeless. So it's virtually difficult to date when our music must have started getting evolved, but we will try to piece together what is available to us too, because history tends to be fuzzy, because after the British period or the modern period, a lot of things are documented, which happens also to be the golden age of our music. But prior to that, there has been a lot of evolution of our music, which I shall try to piece together in a short lecture today. As I said earlier, the only surviving classical system music that has been unbroken through the ages is our music. And earlier, it's difficult to say Carnatic, Hindustani and so on, because Indian music was Indian music earlier. There was only one system throughout Bharatavarsha. And later, as it was handed down through the ages, we can reconstruct it from what is available with the compositions, with certain music treatises. What are the sources? Abdina history textbooks, we have some sources, we have treatises by various musicologists. slide. It can be even said to be traced more than 1000 years before Christ, so 1000 BC. And there are books which are tracing back as fast as the 4th century BC. And we divide basically our music into 3 sections. Ancient history, which was from when music started until about 1200 AD. Then the medieval history, which is from 1200 AD till 1750 AD. And the golden period and modern period, which is 1750 or thereabouts AD till today. Now, what is the basis of this classification is that the ancient period, from the Vedic period down to when the Muslim invasion of India happened, that would be around 1200 AD. Then the medieval period, from this time, that is when the medieval period, that is when the Muslims invaded, until the British period. And the British period started around 1750 until today. So you could even classify this as pre-Muslim invasion, from the Muslim invasion until the British period, which is the medieval, and the modern or the golden age of music. So let's start from the very beginning, where which we can call the earliest or the Vedic period. We already have a reference saying that Sama Veda Saram Varam Varamnu oru reference irukku, that and Sama Veda Didam Griham Sanjagraha Pitamaha Veda Nam Sama Vedo Asmi appadinu solli kuda irukku. So it's as if music can be traced back to the Sama Vedam. But what happened even before that would be the Yajur Vedams, which started off with single notes and one swara above and below. This was how the chanting was done. Indian history is replete with the Guru Shishya Parampara, where the disciple goes to the teacher and imbibes whatever the teacher has to teach. So it's a very close relationship, and very often the student stays with the master, grows with the other children in the ashram. So this is how the master used to impart his the Veda Patham to the Shishyas, to the disciples. There are 4 Vedams: the Rig, the Yajur, the Sama, and the Atharvana Vedam. And the person who sings the Saman chants is said to be the Chandoga. Next. Just like the Vedams, Indian music also has been passed down till today by the Guru Shishya Parampara. Today, of course, there are many ways by which music is being propagated. People are learning from other sources, but essentially what is now handed to us over the centuries was through the master-student relationship. So how did the Rig Veda chants start? Sahasra Sirsha Purushaha Sahasrakshas Sahasravad Yat Bhumi Yachado Brutva Atyatishtat Dashankulam Purushaye Vedagum Sarvam Yat Bhutam Yachabhavyam. In the Madri, you had just 3 notes. There was a common note, then the Udatta and the Anudatta below. The common note was called the Svarita, and the one above and was called the Udatta, below was the Anudatta. This was common across many of the Yajurveda chants. Vishnor Viryani Prabodham Yapparthivani Nimame Jagum Siyovaskavaya Duttaragam Sajakraman Vichakramahanastreyadorukayo Vishnoraradamasi Vishno or Prishtamasi Vishno or Dhruvamasi Vaishnavamasi Vishnavetva. So this was the way the chants happen, with one swara above and one swara below. This was expanded by the rishis into 7 notes. And how did this happen? Was the Samavedam, which was, we'll play a clip of the Samavedam now, and we will see how these 3 notes expanded further. Audio panu. You can observe that there are now more notes than just 3, and this scale was called the Saman scale, and which later evolved into the Shadjagrama. If you take the Shruti, it is ga re sa ni da, pa kuda touch ahu, ga re sa ni da, sa re ga re, more or less today's Kharara Priya, that is the scale, Melakarta scale of 22. And the scale in the this chant, the Saman chant. Later the rishis added on one swara above, which became the Madhyamam, and then the Panchamam below. Ga re sa re ga ma ga re sa ni da, and then they added one swara below, and that entire upper portion was brought down below to complete the heptatonic scale. So this is the evolution of swaras. I shall deal my lecture with how the swaras developed, ragas developed, musical treatises developed, and compositions developed. Of course, today we have manodharma aspects like raga, lapna, neraval and swaram. So this was how the Sama Saptakam evolved as a heptatonic or 7-toned scale. So this was how India, Bharata Varsham, now India is a political entity now, which we look upon as the map as is existing today. But in those days, it used to extend further north and northwest and further to the east also. So this is how ancient India looked before Harsha's time. Before, and on the right you can see King Ashoka's period. This is also in BC, in 250 BC, how you can see the map of India at that time. Next. The earliest treatise that is available comprehensively discussing on both Bharatanatyam as well as certain musical aspects is Bharata's Natya Shastra. The Natya Shastra is dated around the 4th century BC, and Bharata Muni was a sage from Kashmir, and this Natya Shastra, which is available today in Sanskrit, has 6,000 couplets and spread over 36 chapters, and of these the chapters between 28 and 33 are on music. There are references of the microtonal intervals or the shrutis. So gradually, apart from the saptaswaras, there is also mention of the shrutis, the 22 shrutis, and which are called as microtonal intervals, which so gradually we are now developing into more than the 7 swarasthanas. Next. So the Shadjagrama was the original scale, which ran like this. Sa re ga ma pa da ni sa ni da ba ma ga ri sa, which is the Khararapiya scale. How did the other scales develop? Now we are talking about developing of the scales, not of the ragams. There was no concept of ragam even then. At this stage, it was just the grama. This Professor S.R.J. has mentioned in great detail about the grama evolution. But essentially, we need to know what is murchana. Murchana means shifting of the tone, or tonal shift. So, where you have the sarigama padanisa, you take the tone as rigama padanisari or gama padanisariga, and you get a different. Because of the tonal shift, you get a different scale. So this was how the grama, Shadjagrama, gave rise to other scales. The basic shift of the tonic giving rise to other scales. Next. After the Vedic period came the periods of the epics and the Puranas. That is from 500 BC till about 200 AD. Here we have a lot of stories. All the Puranams, all the stories that we get today, the Mahabharata, Ramayana, the Bhagavatam, are said to have been dated around this time. Again, as I told you earlier, a lot of this is still fuzzy. But around this time, we don't have raga still developed, but it is called a jati. Jati is in the sort of a system where you classify. So the Shadjagrama has evolved through the Murchana system into the Jati system, and the Jati is said to be the forerunner of today's Raga system, modern. Next. Now we are talking about pan-Indian music, Indian music, where we have musicologists from the north, that is Bharata Muni from Kashmir. Was there music in the south? Yes. There are references that music was flourishing here, more or less on the same lines as before, and the 7 notes were present here also. Kural tuttam kaikkilai udayinode iliyorudu vilaridaram enbave 7 isayin namam. The 7 notes, 7 isayin namam, were Kural for Shadjam, Tuttam for Rishabam, Kaikkilai Gandharam, Udai is Madhyamam, Ili Panchamam, Vilari is Daivatam, and Dharam is Nishadam. So the 7 notes were present in Tamil Isai also at that stage, and we get references in ancient texts like this Silapadikaram or Purana Rural. Historically, if you see, the Bharata Varsha was very relatively peaceful on the south. There were hardly any invasions. All the invasions happened from the northwest, whereas south was relatively peaceful. So this was how around the 7th century, how the kingdoms of the south were distributed. You had the Rashtrakutas, the Yadavas, all these small kingdoms present in the south. The south was comparatively undisturbed, while there was continuous invasions from the 7th century onwards, more culminating in the 12th and 13th centuries. In the south, we have texts, Sangam texts, which are the earliest texts in South Indian music, Tamil music. They were possibly composed during the 1st and the 5th centuries, the Pandya kings. There are also references of a lot of trade between India and the Greeks, and possibly there was also the reason why the global 7 notes are seen. Like you also have the 7 notes in Western music. So the concept of having 7 swarams or 7 notes is universal. It's global. It's not just confined to our music. The Eastern music is usually having only 5 notes, whereas in the West you have all the 7 notes. Though of course we call them as the major scale and the minor scale in the West, and the concept of music development in the West has been harmonical, whereas our Indian system, the music is melodical as continuous melody, whereas in the West it is harmonical, simultaneous sounding of various notes to give a pleasant outcome or pleasant music. So this was a period when there was a lot of trade between South India and the rest of the world. The Silapadikaram, the epic of the anklet, which was composed by Ilango Adigal, who is a Jain scholar. Remember, at this time Buddhism and Jainism were present, and in fact Jainism was very much prevalent in South India. There were a lot of Jain kings also around the 2nd and 3rd century AD, and this was when Silapadikaram, which speaks about Kannagi and Kovalan and the epic story about Madurai being razed to the ground. All this happened during this period. Why I am bringing this issue is there are mentions of instruments like the yard in the text Silapadikaram. There was a different system here. In Tamil music, there was no grama, there was no murchana, it was called palai. Of course, the system of murchana must have been there because you have all the main palai or the 7 notes, the scales being heard even in Tamil music. The 7 notes yielding to 7 other through the murchana, through other raga scales, and from which the puns, the raga which today we call is called pun, and 103 pun irundirukku. The pun is the Tamil equivalent of the raga. The ancient Tamil treatises like Tolkapiyam and Silapadikaram talk about the pun, and somebody who sings the pun is called Pannati. So you have a person who sings the raga. The Pannati is supposed to be a correlation of today's or forerunner of today's Alapna. Here are some names. You have Takkesi, which corresponds to today's Kambodi, Kausikam Pan, which corresponds to today's Bhairavi, and so on. Sadari Pan, Yalmuri Pan, Kolli Pan, Nattavadai, Padantakkaragam. So all these are ancient names for today's ragams. Today we may not be referring to these ragas, but when you sing Tevaram or Divya Prabandham, especially Tevaram, you may refer to these names by the original pan or the pan in which they were composed. Some of these ragas or these pans are extremely ancient, and it is difficult to say which pan came very, very much earlier, whether they were. Today we have the concept of the Mela ragas or Mela kartas giving rise to the Janaka ragas giving to the rise to the Janya ragas, isn't it? But this concept is much later. Some of the Janya ragas, which we call as Janya ragas by modern names, are present in very ancient texts as the pand. So if you say Kaushikam or Puranirmai, these pands are very, very ancient. These ragas, ancient ragas, were later on classified and placed under certain scales or the Melakarta scheme later by the musicologists. So now we have some North Indian, we have a glimpse of what happened in the northern part of India, how music must have been there. We are still in the ancient period where the Vedas, the Sama Veda has given rise to the notes, the septatonic scale. In the south also, this music has developed. There are references in some texts. We have some musical references from the Natya Shastra by Bharata Muni. So we know that there has been some music there. And also there are references to instruments. The villiard is an example of a stringed instrument with a bow, and probably a precursor. We say that the violin is a Western instrument that has been brought into Carnatic music today, but there are references to a yard which was present with a bow. Of course, we don't have any of those instruments today with us today. Panars were those who were singing Tamil music, and those who could sing and play the yard were called yard panars. In fact, there's a place in Sri Lanka called yard pana. All forms of art were linked to worship. In our country, it has been an integral part of our culture. If you look at sculpture, if you look at paintings, anyone who had an art to be exhibited, to be performed, so let it be dance or theatre or music, it would be as a worship or an offering to the Lord. So this is how it, and music was no exception. So this is intertwined with our religious beliefs that life repeats itself, there is a rebirth, and the ultimate goal, the soul takes many rebirths until it merges with the Lord. These sort of concepts, and the ultimate aim being to attain mukti or salvation by merging with the Lord. This philosophy of Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism used to permeate in all forms of worship also, which means that now we are emerging, we are looking at the emergence of music as a form of worship, Nadopasana. song, of course, was composed much later by Saint Tyagaraja, but goes to show that music was not a form of just entertainment or titillation or emotional outpouring, but also as a way, or Nadopasana is also Nada Yoga, Nada Upasana, all were forms of expression to mukti or attaining salvation. So that is the reason, the question that we have so many Vagyakaras, so many music composers who are saints, because music and meditation, or music and devotion, go hand in hand, and this is universal, not just for our religion, but if you notice that in Islam the muezzin, or in Christianity the choirs, everywhere music is an integral part of prayer. Most of our composers found music as a beautiful vehicle for self-expression, as well as there were several Ishtadevatas there was a huge pantheon of Indian gods. So each saint savant adopted his or her own Ishtadevata and sang songs in praise of the god or goddess. But more of that later. Essentially, I am trying to underline that all Indian music, be it the earlier Thevarams or the later compositions by the post-Trinity composers, all the composers have only seen it as a vehicle to attaining mukti or salvation, Nadopasana, whatever you call it. So, today, of course, in the modern age, contemporarily, it is looked upon as an entertainment, as a form of a performing art, where you have an audience coming, you have an audience, we look forward to applause at the end of each recital, and so on. It's now a performing art, an entertainment, but not so then. Let's look at the earliest composers. We still don't know whether there were composers earlier. There would have been music, but what is the music that still survives today and is being sung today in a Carnatic music recital is the Thevarams. These are all music in the praise of Lord Shiva. If you look at the history of how the Thevarams came, there are references to how Sekidar has mentioned in his Periya Puranam how he was able to recover the Thevarams from the Chidambaram temple, and there are references of 63 saints, Saivite saints, the Aravati mover, of whom the Thevara mover, that is Sambandar, Appar and Sundaramurti Nayanar, these three were the pioneers are spearheading the Shaivite movement. If you look at the historical perspective at that stage, there was an advance of Jainism into South India, and there were many Jain kings who were propagating that religion. And if these Saivite saints had not been there, we would not have been able to get such treasure houses of Saivite philosophy, Hindu philosophy. And so we owe a lot to these three first saints, savants, Jnana Sambandar, Appar or Tirunavakarasar, and Sundarar, who are called as the Thevara mover today. They, apart from the other Nayanmars, they worshipped Lord Shiva, and what is significant is they used to visit all the Shiva temples all over and sing in the praise of the Lord. So that is why they are called Padal Petra Talangal. Even we have songs in praise of Kapalishwarar Koil here, in Lord Shiva here, and Thiruvanmiyur, Thiruvotriyur. They have visited, all these temples and prayed and praised the Lord through their songs. It is sometimes claimed that the first song ever composed was by Jnana Sambandar. Definitely, there are references that he was the world's youngest composer, because the story goes that as a child he was fed by goddess Parvati when found crying on the banks of a temple in Sirgai. And immediately he burst out into song, which means that he must have been the world's youngest composer. Whether this was the earliest composition which we sing today is a matter of conjecture, but otherwise the first song that he composed was Todudaya Seviyan, which today we sing in Gambhiranad. Todudaya Seviyan, Todudaya Seviyan, Todudaya Seviyan, Todudaya Seviyan, Vidaya Vivotugai Madhisuti, Todudaya Seviyan, Vidaya Vivotugai Madhisuti, Todudaya Seviyan, Vidaya Vivotugai Madhisuti, Todudaya Suralai Mori, Todudaya Suralai Mori Bhusiyanulla Kavakalvaru, Todudaya Suralai Mori Bhusiyanulla Kavakalvaru, Nedudaya Malala, Nedudaya Malala, Nedudaya Malala, Munainar Panildeta Arusika, Nedudaya Malala, Munainar Panildeta Arusika, Nedudaya Pirama Meriya Brahmani Vanande, Nedudaya Pirama Meriya Brahmani Vanande, Nedudaya Pirama Meriya Brahmani Vanande. As I said earlier, there were 3 Nayanmars who sang the Thevarams. The 4th, of course, was Manika Vasagar, who sang the Tiruvachakam. But Thevaram, the other famous composer who was also a contemporary of Jnana Sambandar was Appar or Tirunavakarasar. The story goes again that he was a chieftain, a Jain chieftain, who fought the wars under a Jain king. His original name was Marinikiyar, and his sister did not convert to Jainism. She was a staunch Shaivite. The story goes that he was afflicted severely with abdominal colic, and no medicines, no recourse. All the things that they tried didn't cure him of the colicky pain. And then in desperation he approached his sister, and she advised him to sing in the praise of Lord Shiva. So இதுதான் கதை. And அதுக்கப்புறம் அவர் he sang கூற்றாயினவார் விளக்கையிலே பொறுமை பல செய்தன நானறிய கூற்றாயினவார் விளக்கையிலே பொறுமை பல செய்தன நானறிய கொடுமை பல செய்தன நானறிய கொடுமை பல செய்தன நானறிய சேகாயகிகே இரவும் பகலும் ஏகாயகிகே இரவும் பகலும் யாது வணங்குவனும் எப்பொழுதும் தோற்றாதம் வயிற்று அகம்படிய உடலோடு துடக்கி முடக்கிட குடலோடு துடக்கி முடக்கிட நடிகை கெடில வீரத்தான துறை அம்மாவே வீரத்தான துறை அம்மாவே. The reference here is the Kudarodu Tudakki Mudakkiida Thotradan Vayitrin Agambadiye, where he gets very severe abdominal colic. Of course, after that, when he converted to Shaivism, he was tortured, and that is also there. Kodumai Pala Seidana. A lot of references on how he was put to the test for his bhakti by the Jain chieftains, but more of that later. And now we are still in the ancient period. We have not yet moved to the medieval period as yet. These songs that were sung by the Tevara mover were found much later, as they appeared in a dream. And we have the Periya Puranam, which talks about the tales of the Arvati mover. But we are talking of the 4th and 5th century. Couple of centuries later, we find the 3rd Nayanmar, Sundaramurti Nayanar. There again, Sundaramurti Nayanar was belonged to an upper caste family. He, like the rest of the Nayanmars, he was also a great traveler, visited a lot of temples. Stories of how Lord Shiva used to test him also. He wanted to marry Paravai Nachiyar, and then Shiva came in the garb of an old man and said, "You belong to me. This is the document saying that your forefathers have willed you to me, so you can't marry this girl." And then he follows the old man. He doesn't have a choice. He goes to Tiruvarur, and then as the old man goes inside the temple, he vanishes in a glow of light, and he composes his first composition. Pitta pirai sudi perumane arulala pitta perumane arulala pitta pirai sudi perumane arulala Aruran Emperumal Kal Alle Nelalame. He had his mudra. In fact, here we have some aspects of music which have started emerging, and that is the use of the mudra of the composer. Sundaramurthy Nayanar called himself Aruran. So adila Aruran or Thiru Aruran or it is his composition. Sambandar used to have his own Jnana Sambandar as his own mudra. The mudra of the composers have found prosody, so many laya aspects, and if you notice the Dvitiya Akshara Prasam, the second letter, if you say, even in this song, you see Meela Adimai, Moola Tipol, Ala Irukkum, Valangiripir. So the second letter is always the same. So many songs. Ponnar Meniyane, Minnar Senchademel, Manne Mamaniye, Anne Unnayalar. So the second letter. So this sort of prosody, the rhythm, rhyme, meter, all these things have started emerging. Sundaramurthy Nayanar always treated Shiva as his friend. So there used to be a lot of freedom of expression between him and his Ishta Devata Tiruvaruran. Tiruvarur Lord Tyagaraja. So this used to find expression in many of his songs also. For example, in this song Meela Adimai, he says Valangiripir Tiruvaruril Valndu Bodhire. He says, suppose you do not accede to my request, Tiruvaruril Valndu Bodhire. Niye Valnduko, Niye Patko. He tells a lot. நீ உன்னோடைய இஷ்டம் நீ இஷ்டப்படி இருந்துக்கோ வாழ்ந்து போதீரே அப்படின்னு உரிமை தான். அவருக்கு. மூலா தீ போல் உள்ளே கனன்று. See how he describes himself as yearning to meet the Lord. And இவ்வளோ எல்லாம் நீ என்னை பார்த்து கூட என்னை வந்து என்னுடைய பக்தி உனக்கு இது ஆகலைன்னா நீ வாழ்ந்துக்கோ அப்படின்னு. வாழாங்கிருப்பீர் திருவாரூரில் வாழ்ந்து போகிறேன். So this was Sundaramurthy Nayanar. Around the same time, there was the Vaishnavite movement also. Together with the Shaivite movement, the Vaishnavite movements, there was a revival of Hinduism in the southern peninsula during the 6th, 7th and 8th centuries. The Vaishnavite saints, 12 in number, were called Alvar. Alvars means somebody immersed in. ஆழ்ந்து இருக்கிறாங்க, அதனால ஆழ்வார்கள். There were 12 Alvars and they all sang in the name of Vishnu. Aranganadar is mostly the Lord of Srirangam. So who are these 12 Alvars? Periyalvar, his daughter Nachia, that is Andal. Kulasekara Alvar, Tondaradi Pudiyalvar, Tiruppan Alvar, Tirumangai Alvar, Peyalvar, Nammalvar, Tirumalizai Alvar, Bhudatta Alvar, Poige Alvar, and Madura Kavi Alvar. Not necessarily in that chronological order, but these were the Alvars who sang in praise of Lord Vishnu. However, the existent tunes or the way they were recited or chanted are not available today. So today if we sing Tirupavai, they are already set to tune. Mani Madathu Suttu Vilakeriya Mani Madathu Suttu Composed much later, and today in fact Tirupavai sang during Margazhi Masa, every morning it is heard. We also have other Alvars composing, like Periyalvar. பல்லாண்டு பல்லாண்டு பல்லாயிரத்தாண்டு பல கோடி நூறாயிரம் பல்லாண்டு பல்லாண்டு பல்லாயிரத்தாண்டு பல கோடி நூறாயிரம் பல்லாண்டு பல்லாண்டு பல்லாயிரத்தாண்டு பல கோடி நூறாயிரம் ஆயிரம் பல்லாண்டு அடியோடும் ஆயிரம் பல்லாண்டு இந்த மங்கையும் பல்லாண்டு வடிவா சோதி வளத்துறையும் சுடராடியும் பல்லாண்டு வடிவா சோதி வளத்துறையும் சுடராடியும் பல்லாண்டு படைவோர் முழங்கும் அப்பாஜ கனியமோ பல்லாண்டு படைவோர் முழங்கும் அப்பாஜ கனியமோ பல்லாண்டு 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 பல்லாயிரத்தாண்டு பலகோடி நூறாயிரம் பல்லாண்டு பல்லாண்டு. We are now looking at evolution of the composition. Of course, I am trying a chronological evolution as well as how music would have evolved. First, we had from the Saman chants the development of the 7 notes, and then from the 4th century BC, we have references about the jatis, how the grama, the Shadja grama with its murchanas evolved or gave rise to the different scales, the Gandhara grama, the Madhyama grama also. Through the murchanas, through the shift of the tone, we then came on to the compositions, the Saivite and the Vaishnavite movements. So we are now still in the ancient period of music. Now we shift to the medieval period. A lot of the medieval period, a lot of information is not available today. There have been composers like Jayadeva and Uttugadi Venkata Subbayar and Purandaradasa Annamacharya during this period. This was the blossoming of or the foundation stone for the music to follow much later. But in terms of historical perspective or what was available to us, a lot of historical information is not available. But this was the time when it must have started earlier also, around the 7th century, to the northwest of India. We started getting invaders. We are all aware, we would have learnt in our 7th standards and 8th standard in a school, we would have learnt about Ghazni who plundered the Somnath temple 17 times. All these stories are available to us today. Essentially, it means that there was an invasion of the Bharatavarsha by the cultures from the northwestern border, which include Afghanistan, the Persian, and to some extent there is a references of even Alexander of Greece also, who is supposed to extend his empire to that area. So this was also the period, the medieval period was also when there has been a constant intermingling of the cultures also. And from around 1200 AD till the British period, which is advent of the British Raj, this was the medieval period. So, because of the influence of the north, the Arabs and the Afghans and the persons from the northwestern frontier, we have intermingling of these cultures, and the khayal, the ghazals, the thumris, and the earliest forms of Hindustani music, which is the Drupad form. These are were found prevalent during this period, and famous musicians like Tansen, who adorned Akbar's court. Akbar was a great connoisseur of the arts, so during this period, the Mughal Empire also started flourishing. So the medieval period was a huge melting pot of cultural invasion from the northwest, and as you know, the Mughal Empire extended right through the Deccan during this period. So this is the early period of Ghaznī's invasion, the India in 1030 AD, and much later Sultan Iltutmish, his empire. There was a slave dynasty, the Khilji dynasty. Next. And all the way until Akbar's death in 1605, this was where, this was the map of India. Can't say India, the map of the southern peninsula at that time, when Akbar's empire extended all the way up to Afghanistan, Kabul, and east up to Bengal, and south almost up to the Deccan Plateau. Next. So now we come to the divergence of the musical streams. I am often asked this question: Hindustani sounds as if it is part of Indian, Carnatic doesn't sound as if it's part of the state of Karnataka. The only reference that we have is that of Sangeeta Sudhakara by King Haripala Deva. He was a king of Devagiri, which is today in Maharashtra, and he has written a book called the Sangeeta Sudhakara. In those days, the kings used to be great patrons, and often not just patrons but also scholars of music. And between 1309 and 1312 AD, that is, we're talking about 800 years ago, we find references that there has been a divergence of the musical streams. What was Indian music became Hindustani and Carnatic music. So this is the first reference. It says, Tadapi Dvividam Geyam Dakshinottara Bhetataha. Dakshinottara Bhetataha means difference. Karnatakam Dakshine Syat. Karnatakam became part of the southern part of music, and Hindustani Tadhotare. Hindustani became the music of the north. So till now, what was the pan-Indian or Indian music divided into the Hindustani and the Carnatic. Next. So this was, how do we know how music had developed? We have got some musical treatises. Along with this, we will not just a brief touch upon the various treatises that contain references to the various ragams and the scales. So we have Swaramela Kalanidhi by Rama Matyar. Rama Matyar was a minister in his the King Achyutaraya's court, and he was commissioned to write a book on music. This was in 1550 AD. Then His Holiness Vidyaranya Swamigal, he wrote Sangeeta Saram. So the Vijayanagara Empire was when a lot of musical treatises have been written, and now you get the references to the Mela Kartas or the Mela scheme. There were initially just 15 Melas, but later on expanded by Venkatamakin to include the 72 Mela Karta schemes. So now we have a definitive musical references, not just compositions, but musical references to the ragas, evolution, how these ragas are codified, and how you can classify them according to the Mela scheme. Of course, that is a separate topic. The Mela Karta chapter is Taniya Pesana, but the references, the seeds of the Mela Karta scheme were sowed around this time. Next. Seeds of music. The kingdoms of Vijayanagar, Mysore, Tanjavur, music would not have flourished in those periods without the patronage of these kings. So Vijayanagar, Mysore and Tanjavur were originally the seats. Later on, during the British period, we had these smaller fiefdoms like Etayapuram, Bobili and such smaller fiefdoms which also patronized music. Next. So we have now seen music as sung in the temples through the Oduvars, the Tevarams, or chanted in the temples, in the Arayar Sevai or in the Vaishnavite temples. How it has come out of the temples and now moving into the courts. The royal, the patronage, the king's courts which are promoting music, and evolution of music also through the major treatises, Brihadeshi, Matanga Muni, then Abhinava Gupta's Abhinava Bharati. These are some important musical treatises. Narada Sangita Makarandam, Sangita Samayasaram by Parshvadevar. There were so many musical books which give us references to the various ragams, the Lakshana Geetams of various ragams which are available to us. Next. Another landmark book was Sangita Ratnakara by Sarangadeva. Sarangadeva also hailed from Kashmir, and nearly 18 centuries after Bharathamuni, he wrote a book. He was also called Nishanka Sarangadeva, means he had no doubts, he was very clear in his perspectives. And in his book, Sangita Ratnakaram, we find references to the Grama, the Murchana, the Mela, the Jati, and the compositions, Varna and so on. Next. Ragas have now started emerging, and according to the seasons, according to the nature of the ragams, the times of the day, we started getting Raga Lakshana, and the delineation of the Vadi Swarangal, the Samvadi Swarangal. As we all know, the cycle of the fifths and the cycle of the fourths, how Sama and Sapa, idilendu varra அழகான ராகங்கள் அதனுடைய கிளாசிஃபிகேஷன் இதெல்லாம் இப்போ வர ஆரம்பிச்சு. People have found out this was already discussed in an earlier lecture by Professor SRJ about the different, how these ragas must have evolved through the cycle of the fourths, the cycle of the fifths, Sajja Madhyama Bhava and the Sajja Panchama Bhava. All these things have started evolving now. Next. Towards the fag end of the medieval period, we have another very famous book called the Chaturdandi Prakashika. The Chaturdandi was written by Venkatamakin, who classified the ragas. Now we have various scales. Now he has, just as the Mendeleev had classified the various elements, he gave a list. He classified them according to the type of Rishabham, the type of Gandharam, the type of Madhyamam. So first 36 had Shuddha Madhyamam, the next 36 had Prati Madhyamam. Then within that he found what are called Chakrams. There were 6 Chakrams in the first half and 6 in the second, making 12. Each Chakram had 6 Ragams, so 12 into 6 gave us 72. This sort of classification was called the Melakarta classification by Venkatamakin, in which, of course, this was some of them, the ragas that he mentioned were borrowed from the ancient ones, which are called as Kalpita Melangal, already composed. Some of them did not have all the swarams also, so there were some of them with a couple of swarams missing also. These were Kalpita Melangal, already established ones. Kalpiyamana Melangal, those which were prevalent and could become popular, and Kalpeshyamana Melangal, those which would become popular in the future dates. So this sort of codification we owe to this great musicologist who has the foresight to anticipate some ragas to become famous in the future. Kalpeshmana Melangal kuda solli he has composed. Next, and for all of these he gave the lakshanas of the ragams. Later, another musicologist is called Govindacharya. He modified the scheme to contain only Sampurna ragas. Only all swarams must be there. So these are the characteristics. He defined what is the melam, that they must be Sampurnam. All swarams must be there. They must be Krama Sampurnam. They must be in order. And there must be homogeneity. Whichever swaras go up in the Arohanam should come back to the Avarohanam. A lot of people feel that a Melakarta Ragam is a Ragam. Actually, a Melakarta is just a scale. It's just the arrangement of scales following these important things. That is, they must have homogeneity in the swaras. They must be in order, and all the swarams must be there. In the Mari properties which in Ragangal Lame, they were codified and put into 12 chakrams of 6 ragams each with a total of 72. This was the forerunner of a lot of ragas evolved later as the Janaka Janya scheme. So these were called the Janaka ragas, and later on the where you eliminate 1 or 2 swarams later, or bring in foreign notes, or have a vakram or a non-linear arrangement of these swarams, you get the Janya ragams. You have several examples, like if you omit some swarams, you get Mohanam or Shuddha Saviri, like that. Or if you have a non-linear, you get ragams like Riti Gaulai. Or import of foreign notes, you get ragams like Bhairavi or Kamboji. But still, we are still in the 17th century AD, in the medieval period, where the ragams are just emerging, and now compositions have started. We already have seen what happened in the ancient period, but in the medieval period, where were the compositions? Where were they heard, or who were the great composers during this period? We had first Jayadeva, who actually falls that cusp between the ancient and the medieval period. He was minister in the court of a Chola king. You'll be surprised to know that Chola kings had ruled a large portion of India at that period, and also there was an extension of the Chola Empire into the Far East, into countries like Indonesia and Cambodia and so on. So this was a period when a lot of the South Indian Chola kings' empires extended far beyond the borders of just Tamil Nadu. Anyway, Jayadeva composed his opera called Gita Govindam, containing 24 songs, each song having 8 padas. So they are called Ashtapadis. And his songs were all composed in Puri, in the praise of Lord Jagannatha. This is in the form of an opera, and employed the Nayaka Nayika Bhava, where he used to sing these songs, and his wife Padmavati, it is said, used to dance to these compositions. This is one of the earliest compositions during the medieval period, and they were sung, and today also they are sung in both the styles, Hindustani as well as the Carnatic style. There is usually a dhyana slokam and then followed by the Ashtapadis. For want of time, I will just sing 1 or 2 padams, padas of the Ashtapadi. Tamath manmath kimna rati rasabhinna Vishada sampanna अनुचिंतित हरिचरिता कलहातरित मुवाच रहसि सखी हरि रवि सरति वहति मधुपवने हरि रवि सरति वहति मधुपवने किमवमधिक सुखं सखि भुवने हरि रवि सरति वहति मधुपवने किमवमधिक सुखं सखि भुवने मानवे मा कुरु मणि मानवे मा कुरु मणि मानवे मा कुरु मणि मानवे मा कुरु मणि श्री जय देव वणितं हरिललितं श्री जय देव वणितं हरिललितं सुगयदुरसिकजनं हरिचरितं श्री जय देव वणितं हरिललितं सुगयदुरसिकजनं हरिचरितं सुगयदुरसिकजनं हरिचरितं सुगयदुरसिकजनं हरिचरितं सुगयदुरसिकजनं हरिचरितं. That was Jayadeva. A couple of centuries later, we have the Sangeeta Pitamahar Purandardasa, another sage and savant. 1480 to 1565 AD. The story goes that he was a diamond merchant and extremely miserly and very much attached to worldly wealth and possessions. And the story goes that through one of God's Leelas, the episode of the diamond ring, in which he realized the life that he had been leading was of no consequence. He gave away all his worldly possessions and became a mendicant, a traveling this thing. He spent the rest of his life in Hampi, and it's said that he composed 4,75,000 songs, a few of which are available with us today. There is a Paddhati, all the dasars of Karnataka still, there are many dasars. Vijaya Dasa, Gopala Dasa, the dasars of Karnataka, they composed padams, dasar padas, and those are still being sung in various temples across Karnataka today. Anyways, Pitamar, why do we call him Sangeeta Pitamar? Was because it is said that he laid the foundation for the Aramba Padangal or the Abhyasa Ganam of today. The Sudadi Saptatalangala composed Pandina Alankarangal. Sariga magari sarigari sariga mariga mapa magariga magariga mapa gama pada mama gama pama gama pada, and so on. These songs, these alankarams which are taught to every child in the beginning of their education, are said to have been composed by Saint Purandardasa. They are all composed in Maya Malagoda. But of course, he is better known for his songs all composed in praise of his Ishta Devata Purandara Vitthala. Baraya Venkataramana Bhaktara Nidhiye Toraya Ninapada Toya Jamakane Toya Jamakane Baraya Venkataramana Bhaktara Nidhiye Bhaktara Manade Toraya Ninapada Toya Jamakane Toya Jamakane Baraya Veda Gochara Baro Adi Gachaba Baro Veda Gochara Baro Adi Gachaba Baro Mora Baro Sadaya Narasimha Baro Mora Sundara Baro Sadaya Narasimha Baro Baraya Venkataramana Bhaktara Nidhiye Manage Toraya Ninapada Toya Jamakane Toya Jamakane Baraya He used the mudra Purandara Vitthala in praise of his Ishta Devata Vitthala. Around this time, or rather just after this time, was the period of Talapaka Annamacharya. We are still in the medieval period before the British have really invaded or established their supremacy in India. So, in the period there were a few composers like Talapakam Annamacharya who are said to be the earliest composers of the modern day Kriti. The compositions which were earlier in the form of padas or kirtanas, now they get a certain Kriti format as a Pallavi, Anupallavi, Charanam. So the first known South Indian musician to compose songs called Sankirtanas or Kritis, he is, of course, he was also a traveling mendicant, but he lived and composed his songs in Tirupati, from where the copper plates were unearthed as recent as 1922, and these copper plates that are available to us show that he was a composer of great merit. He composed in Telugu, and his songs, some of them are quite elaborate, some of them are a little folksy, but anyway, they are very popular, and the tunes have been set more recently because only the ragam is mentioned, but otherwise you can see there a copper plate containing the songs of Annamacharya. They show the songs composed in Telugu in the format of, let's sing a song composed by Annamacharya. Idadokade Sarveshwarudu Idadokade Sarveshwarudu Idadokade Sarveshwarudu Sita Kamala Sudushi Venkateshwaru Idadokade Sarveshwarudu Sita Kamala Sudushi Venkateshwaru இது ரொம்ப ஹெவியா ஒரு ரொம்ப வெயிட்டான ஒரு பீஸ் மாதிரி தெரியும். பட் அதே மாதிரி there are some songs which are folksy also. தந்தனானாகி தந்தனானா புரே தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா பிரம்மமொக்கட்டே பர பிரம்மமொக்கட்டே பர பிரம்மமொக்கட்டே பர பிரம்மமொக்கட்டே தந்தனானாகி தந்தனானா புரே தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா பட தந்தனானா. So this was Talapaka Annamacharya. Down south we have Arunagirinathar, also of the 15th century. Chanda Pavala Peruman, he was called because of his skillful usage of the Tamil lyrics. There are stories again of him being a vagabond or a wastrel, and then he tried to commit suicide, saved by Lord Muruga, and composed 16,000 songs, some of which are available today as Tirupugal. Tirupugal, songs composed in praise of Lord Muruga, his Ishta Devata. He was a prolific composer, and Kirtana will now sing a song of மறு குலாவிய மலரணை கொதியாதே மறு குலாவிய மலரணை கொதியாதே மறு குலாவிய மலரணை கொதியாதே மறு குலாவிய மலரணை கொதியாதே மறு குலாவிய மலரணை As I've already mentioned, Arunagirinathar is well known for his rhythmic intricacies in the compositions. The finest examples of the Tamil poetic versifications are seen as his compositions, the Iyarpa, Isaippa and the Chandappa. Next. Around this time, there was a fanatic ruler in the North India, Aurangzeb, who was not as tolerant as Emperor Akbar. He, in fact, banned music, and there was a lot of persecution of musicians and those who, a lot of Hindus and priests were persecuted. Music was also banned. However, his the emperor who succeeded him, last emperor in the Mughal rule, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was a lover of music and literature. So during Aurangzeb's period, this was where you can see that on the right side the map, Aurangzeb, virtually entire the peninsula has been covered by the Mughal Empire. Gradually the Marathas have started raising their head against the Mughal Empire. So we are talking of the 17th century. The Marathas started establishing their rule. Why I am saying this as part of history is because we are entering the golden period of Carnatic music, which flourished in Tanjavur, which came under the rule of the Marathas also. So the Marathas dynasty, some of them came all the way from the west into region as far south as Tanjavur, bringing with them a lot of their culture. So this was when the Nama Sankirtanam period, where you must remember at this time in that area there was a lot of revival of music and Nama Sankirtan through Jnanadev, Namdev, Jnaneshwar, Tukaram, all these Maratha saints. They propounded the singing of kirtans in the name of their Ishta Devatas, mostly Lord Vishnu and Pura Vithala. And this culture of Nama Sankirtanam was brought into Tanjavur, this belt, by the Maratha rulers. You had Tulajaji, Sarfoji, Saraboji, all of whom were not only patrons but also they have written books in music also. So the Marathi Harikade, the Kirtan, all these forms of bhakti were introduced during this period. As you all know, that Kirtanam is one of the forms of the Navavida Bhakti. And though there have been compositions earlier like Tevaram or Ashtapadis and so on, the influence of this must have been there in the region. One, it was a potpourri of cultures. We have the Mughal Empire extending almost up to that area. Because of that, a lot of families from the Deccan Plateau are also in Andhra Pradesh, today's Andhra Pradesh. Many families coming down south. From Maharashtra, many families coming down south to Tanjavur. So it's a potpourri of various cultures. Along with that, you have Nama Sankirtanam, you have Ashtapadis being sung, you have Marathi bhajans from the Maharashtra. You have North Indian bhajans, Tulsidas, Raidas, Kabir and Mirabai, all those being... So all these were imported, and you had Sridhara Ayyawad, Sadguru Samigal, and Bodhendra Sadguru, the trinity of the Nama Sankirtanam era, who established, when Samartha Ramdas established his mutt in Tanjavur in 1663, there was an explosion of bhakti and an explosion of this form of music. We must know that there is a difference between the Kirtanam and the Kriti that we sing today. Kirtanam, the musical import is not as important as the import of what we are saying. So Kirtanam, the importance is more given to the bhakti or the emotional or the content of what we sing, whereas the Kriti is a more evolved format. Of course, the lyrical content is very important, but it's more a finer composition, and the music is also intertwined with the composition itself. The importance is given to the music also. So now we are moving on to the golden period of Carnatic music. Remember, just as a brief, I will continue this lecture at a later period. We'll talk about the golden period, but I'll just give a brief introduction to this period. We have now, during the ancient period, evolution of the swaras, evolution of the heptatonic scale, evolution of the grama, murchana onto the ragam. So that was one line of development. We have evolution of the Tevaram in the south, and the evolution of the compositions starting from Jayadeva's Ashtapadi and other pre-Trinity composers like Purandardas and Arunagirinathar and Talapakam Annamacharya. But now we are entering a period when there's a lot of the British actually became as traders. So they established outposts and many kingdoms just to pay a tax to them. They came as traders. So East India Company was collecting the taxes from various smaller kingdoms. They had their own independent ruling. So which is why many of these rulers didn't have much to rule. They were patrons of music, they were patrons of the arts, a lot of music, a lot of dance, a lot of drama, all these things evolved. Nama Sankirtan evolved, laid a major foundation for the golden period that was to follow, which would be the 17th and the 18th centuries. For lack of time, I think I'll wind up now, and we will deal with the golden period of music later.